Okay, we're good.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our emergency meeting of the Sachem Board of Education on June 6th. If everyone could please rise for the pledge and then remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
Of the United States of America and to
and
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before I let Dr. Pelletieri update the community, I just wanted to let everyone know that, you know, I wanted to do this rather than just send a letter. I want you to see our faces. I want you to see that we've been working all weekend. We've been trying to get updates all weekend. We haven't stopped all weekend since, you know, this guidance came out. And to say that we're frustrated, I'll steal Chris's line here, is an understatement. None of us want this. We were perfectly happy with the guidance that came out on Friday, but deep down, we know that this is what politics looks like. Layers of government, no local control, and just power plays for each other. And at the end of the day, you know, this is why a letter did not go out on Friday. But I'm going to let Dr. Pelletieri update the community, and then we'll see if we want to discuss afterward.
Thank you. Yes, as many in the community know, Friday afternoon, evening, a letter went out from Howard Zucker from New York State Department of Health to the CDC asking permission to remove the mask mandate or make masks optional for vaccinated or unvaccinated students and staff in our schools in New York State. If we did not hear by Monday the 7th, we were going to initiate that. I think several districts actually jumped out and started to put language together around that. I suggested that we kind of hesitate on that because we've seen this kind of play out before. Information goes out from one department, is changed by another, has to be filtered through another. So that letter went out Friday. I assumed that they had their information already from the CDC. Why else would you put out an email Friday afternoon? Say by Monday you needed this, or Sunday night. But lo and behold, they did not have that information. They did not have that permission. And this afternoon, we did get that clarification that we were looking for, and at least telling us what to do. And what they did say was that, and I will quote, the state education department has been in communication with the staff in regards to the letter from Howard Zucker, New York State Commissioner of Health. According to conversations with the executive staff, the intent of the letter was to obtain a response from the CDC. It is regarding differing standards for summer camps and schools. It has not changed any existing arrangements. Therefore, schools should continue to operate under their existing procedures until further notice. So that was clarified this afternoon. No changes have been made by the executive until after June 7th to afford the CDC an opportunity to respond to the letter. As a result, has been the case all year, students, faculty, staff, and visitors will be required to wear a mask when in school until the district receives further guidance on this matter. That last couple of sentences from my letter that I'm sending out in a few minutes. But again, the State Ed Department did clarify for us today. There's a story in Newsday with the information if people want to read more into this. But again, schools should continue to operate under existing procedures until further notice. This is from the State Ed Department. We're hoping to get further notice after Monday, June 7th. That's what they told us.
All right. Yeah, 1 second, Meredith. I'll call you right after me, I promise. Chris, if you could just update the community. I think some confusion lies into the DOH is asking the CDC, and then it's not the DOH that releases a new letter, but it's the New York State Education Department. So there just seems to be so many chefs in the kitchen. Who is actually in charge in making the decision, and who do we actually need to listen to?
So that's that's not as simple to answer as one might imagine. So Zucker acted at behest of the governor, sent the letter to CDC. Now, in the past, you know, CDC has made recommendations. They go back to state ed. They go back to the Department of Health. They forward that to local departments of health, and then we get a decision. Here, this was just put out pretty much to everyone on Friday from Zucker's office, from the Department of Health, saying we're asking the CDC for permission. Many people read that as, well, it's done, it's optional. And we have to get direct guidance from the state education department in terms of what we are doing. We also would like, obviously, guidance from Department of Health, which we get and weighs on our decisions as well. The local departments usually tend to get that guidance from the state Department of Health.
Thank you. Meredith?
So pretty much I was going to say what Alex said, but if you read the letter, it wasn't actually asking the CDC for permission. It was asking the CDC. It was saying, we're going to move forth with this
Unless
on Monday, provided that the CDC doesn't throw a wrench in it.
Right.
Now, to my knowledge, the CDC hasn't thrown any wrenches. The Commissioner of Education threw a wrench, but at what point do we as a board say, well, we listened to Rosa, the Commissioner of Education, over Cuomo, the governor? I mean, just a few days ago, we were all in the same room saying that we listen to Cuomo. Now, all of a sudden, we don't listen to Cuomo. That's hard for parents to understand. You know, letterhead from Cuomo, from Zucker, on Cuomo's letterhead with Zucker's signature should supersede a random email from an email address not signed by anybody, but we are told that it comes from her office. That's very hard to digest. And there are quite a few school districts who are still saying that they will go ahead without the masks tomorrow until further notice, until Cuomo tells them. So if they get one day without the mask and then Cuomo says, sorry, guys, you got to put your masks back on, you cross that bridge when you get to it. But I think, you know, we're going back and forth on who we're supposed to listen to. And at the end of the day, you could have 3 supervisors at your job. You ultimately listen to the head boss who's in charge of everything. And that's what we all kind of said the other day. How could we walk back on that?
Jimmy?
Chris Clayton, wouldn't you, to Meredith's point, wouldn't we have wanted to have heard something from the CDC over the weekend? Shouldn't they be having an emergency meeting or had some input to have stopped Zucker's guidance?
So it's funny, right?
Why are we adhering to a maybe as opposed to a directive we had already got Friday?
So, you know, the frustration that you share is something that I've been wrestling with since it came out on Friday. You know, it appeared from Dr. Zucker's letter that he was making a statement that this wasn't something that was, you know, under consideration or we were awaiting guidance. It was almost like this declaration that effective Monday, we're doing this. If you want to stop us, CDC, let us know. I can imagine if I'm sitting in the position of the Center for Disease Controls down in Washington, D.C., thinking to myself, well, that's interesting that you say that, Dr. Zucker, but I don't work for you. I don't have the obligation to, you know, work over the weekend for you. I have issued the guidance that applies right now, nor have I changed that guidance. You've asked me to justify or reject your proposed change, you know, late Friday afternoon and setting a date of Monday for compliance. I, the CDC, respond that, or don't respond because I've already written what the guidance is and I haven't changed it yet. So I don't know. I mean, I can imagine that's the dynamic, right, Jimmy? This is pure, Mr. Macaruso, this is pure speculation on my part. You're just trying to figure out and read the tea leaves as to what's going on. What I do know is that there was a group of lawyers who were all, you know, either immediate officers or past officers of the School Attorneys Association who got on the phone Saturday morning with Jay Warona, who obviously you all know from the State School Boards Association. And among the participants in that call was Dan Fuller, who is the governor's designated deputy for educational affairs. And Mr. Fuller made it clear in that call that he did not believe that it wasn't the position, frankly, of the administration, that Dr. Zucker's letter meant to be a directive to school districts. Rather, it was an inquiry to the CDC. It was provided as a, you know, a piece of information for school districts to understand that those efforts were being made, but not as a directive that on Monday morning we're expected to be relieved of that. I experienced personally and share the frustration of everybody who read that letter, which was written in plain English and appeared to say that the change was going to be implemented Monday. unless the CDC said otherwise. And so we waited, despite those sort of apparently conflicting pieces of information, as you have all identified. I mean, who do you listen to in this thing? So we hear that the commissioner of health for New York State says one thing. He appears to be saying that with the authorization of the governor. We await some CDC guidance, and also, as you've seen, anytime we try to see what the written guidance is, because okay, you're saying that we don't need to wear masks, but does that mean you're going to change the contact tracing? Does that mean, for all the technicians, and I know, obviously you have your administration on the phone for Dr. Pelletieri and Ms. Capel-Eden and Ms. Trombetta, who have been, and Ms. Hines, everybody who's been managing the compliance in terms of contact tracing and having to deal with, students who are deemed to be close contacts and had to be quarantined. Our big question is, okay, if the masks are coming off, do we also have a relaxation in the quarantine obligations? Can we have asymptomatic people who have been immunized excluded from quarantine? Can we have people who are, receive a negative PCR test or a negative rapid test? Can they test out of quarantine? So we're not dealing with a situation where we're dealing with relaxed mask obligations, but the same very restrictive quarantine obligations. I mean, all of this was stuff that I was hoping on your behalf that the guidance would address on Sunday afternoon. So we'd be walking back into school with our children unmasked and an ability to ensure that, by coming back unmasked, we weren't going to be running into a situation where all the kids who want to graduate in 2 weeks or want to go to the prom in 2 weeks were suddenly going to be deemed a close contact under the old rules and potentially quarantined. That would seem almost an absurd result, right? So we were hoping that all of that would happen. And instead, what we got was, the missive from the Commissioner of Education, who said, let's just not kid ourselves, folks. I mean, she was unequivocal in her statement that the direction is that the mask protocols remain in place from the position of state ed. State ed gives us guidance. In New York State, the Commissioner of Education is a constitutional officer, has, since the time of Teddy Roosevelt, and has had, independent power and authority. So it would be difficult for me, again, it's kind of like we're back to the future. We're back on last Wednesday where I'm saying we've got somebody who has the apparent authority giving us a directive saying that the mask protocols are in place. And to violate that rule puts us at the risk of violating, responsibilities that we have to uphold the law. And I say that to you, having been dealing with this issue almost unbroken since Friday afternoon through Saturday and today on Sunday. I mean, there are many people on the call, with whom I've had, discussions since this morning. So to say that I, share your frustration as a lawyer for you who is invested in the well-being of the Sachem Central Schools, and as the father of a junior in another high school, would be an understatement. This is, from my perspective, and I don't expect anybody to answer to it, an example of, whipsawing unclear and bad governance. But nonetheless, the latest clear guidance and unequivocal that we have received is that which Dr. Pelletieri has shared with you, the Commissioner of Education, saying, hold fast and wait until the guidance from the CDC before we make any changes. And as it stands, the last order that we gave you is the one that stands, which is, the guidance documents that we've been operating under as late as last Wednesday. And, not to go back in the Wayback Machine, but as late as May 25th, the Comac School District, as we talked about in our last meeting, thought, and I don't think unreasonably, that maybe we could make a change, and was very severely chastised by the very Department of Health that's created this confusion. So other than to tell you that as your lawyer, I share your frustration. I feel it both personally and professionally that I think we're being put in the middle of something that we didn't create. Nonetheless, the latest, most unequivocal, clear statement that we received from a state official authorized to give it is the Commissioner of Education's statement that, we are still bound by the mask guidelines until they get that updated guidance from the CDC and the change promulgated officially from the Department of Health.
Jim,
That's-
Laura, then Meredith, please.
Yeah, this is outrageous. It really is. It's
Outrageous,
It's
Jim.
not just
It is
frustrating,
outrageous.
It's outrageous. Now, look, we all said at the last meeting that we weren't going to violate the governor's edict because it was a law and we had a violation of our oath if we did so. But this thing is crazy. The governor and the State Department of Health said, hey, here we go, you could do this. And then they go and they ask, unless, of course, if the CDC comes to us and says, hey, that's not a good idea. Now, the CDC hasn't done that, has not done that. They've been silent. And then as you said, Chris, and you're 100% right, the CDC's attitude is, we don't work for you. We're not going to even get involved in that. So what are we going to deal with? We're going to wait for the CDC. We'll wait until next year sometime. So my position here is that we're going to have to take a challenge here somewhere along the line. SED's been challenged before. They've been challenged before. They've been challenged on testing. They've been challenged on a lot of issues. This isn't, at least I don't look at this as the same as going against the governor's law or his edict. I look at this as saying, you know what, enough is enough. State Education Department, you should have even gotten involved if the answer to the problem was, we're going to dump it on CDC. Whoever asked you for your opinion, that wasn't what they were looking for in guidance. Because now we're nowhere. Now nobody knows what to do.
Mrs. Slattery.
And I'm gonna agree with Jim. As I've always said, during my 6 years here, I worked for attorneys for 36 years of my life. Legally, when I raised my hand, I was sworn to uphold the laws. The governor's letter on Friday was clear. We, and I feel me, have to take a stand for our students. The governor is not going to take away funding. He doesn't believe our kids should be wearing masks. He does not believe our kids should be wearing masks. The CDC, schools all across the country, everywhere, do not require masks in school anymore. In New York State, the mask was here because the governor wanted it. He doesn't want it anymore. I don't believe our kids need to wear masks. I believe it needs to be optional. That's just where I stand. I agreed with you, Chris Clayton, on Wednesday, 100%. We could not take the risk of our funding being cut. I 1,000,000% agreed with that because the governor would have made an example of us. At this point, he can't walk back what he said on Friday. And he didn't walk it back. The Department of Education got involved, and I don't know why. And until I hear from the CDC or the governor's office that our students must wear masks and that is the law, I disagree with what was put out today.
Meredith, Sarah, and then Rob, and then Bill, sorry.
So Creighton, in your professional legal opinion, would the letter from Zucker on Cuomo letterhead hold up over a random email that did not have a signature on it? It was words in an email from her, not even from her own email address. So it wasn't a notice signed by her and then sent out to everybody. It was a random email that people have actually copied and pasted and put all over the internet. It had zero signature. We wouldn't have even known who it was from had we not asked you who it was from, because it doesn't say her name in any way. So how can that hold up in a court of law over, how can they come and say, well, Sachem's not wearing masks and, Commissioner Rosa said that they absolutely should be, when Governor Cuomo told us it was okay that we don't? So would that hold up in a court of law where they could prosecute us in any way?
So I'll tell you my perspective based on the procession of events that happened this weekend. On Saturday morning, one of my partners, Neil Block, was a participant. He's the former president of the School Attorneys Association. He and a group of other lawyers that represent school districts, they basically had representatives from each of the major firms that represent school districts, were on the phone with Jay Warona from state school boards. We managed to get, as a participant on that call, Dan Fuller, who, as you know, is an individual with whom we've interacted over many months as the governor's representative and deputy assigned to education. Fuller made it clear in that phone call, and he is, Meredith, to my knowledge, the representative of the governor. I mean, he is, you can look him up. He's, to a degree at least, authorized to speak on behalf of the governor. And at least as it began on Saturday morning, he started to walk back some of the presumptions that we made based on Dr. Zucker's letter that was issued Friday night. And he said, listen, Zucker's letter was a request and a demand made of the CDC in terms of trying to get their action to address the concerns that were set forth. It was not a directive to school districts to act upon what was there. And again, I just want to qualify it by saying, personally and professionally, as a reader of that letter, that's a difficult position for them to take, because the letter seemed to be fairly unequivocal in the language that it used, that, look, we're implementing this stuff on Monday, which is what got us all scrambling on Friday night as it was. But I have no question or doubt that Dan Fuller is somebody who speaks as a representative of the governor. When we received the commissioner's email, and again, I agree with you, Meredith, it was on that sort of listserv format, in an email to, basically, we're going to call it like an expression to the field. It went to superintendents and whoever else, attorneys got it and so forth. That was shared with those of us who represent school districts by state school boards beforehand as an actual expression of Dr. Rosa's guidance. And so I don't have a basis to tell you that I in any way doubt the provenance of that, meaning that I don't think there's any basis to say it wasn't the Commissioner of Education that wrote that language was not written with the authority and the force of effect of the Commissioner's authority to give us a direction. So I believe that guidance and direction, which was, if those of you who have read the email can see it, it's contained in very bold language, the operative directive that we're still to adhere to the old guidance. And I would say to you that, absent my belief that that was, created and mailed to us by an imposter, which is not something that I believe, we are an entity as a school district that's bound to adhere to directions from the Commissioner of Education. As I said, the Commissioner of Education is a creature of the New York State Constitution. That office has the authority and the original jurisdiction to pass judgment on educational affairs. And again, to the extent that there is a group or people who believe, look, we should, as an act of civil disobedience or something else, say otherwise, I suppose that's a discussion to have, and we can talk about the relative merits or wisdom of that. But suffice it to say that I do not believe that email was written by, an imposter, even though it came, in that listserv style delivery. It was transmitted by state school boards as a representation of the commissioner's direction. And again, I share your frustration at it, and I share your frustration that it doesn't seem that the entities that wrote the guidance or the apparent changes in the guidance on Friday are not owning their own directions and giving us clear understanding of where they stand in it. Why this has to come from different places, I don't know. But if you're asking me if I doubt that it came from the commissioner, my answer is no, I don't doubt it. If you're asking me as a lawyer whether I think we are bound by a directive of the Commissioner of Education, yes, I do.
But if the governor and the Commissioner of Education each gave us different directives, who by law would we have to listen to?
Well, what's interesting to me, Meredith, and that's a point too, right? We've been sitting here since, 2020, receiving sometimes daily executive orders from the governor, right? The governor has shown himself not to in any way be shy about utilizing the power that was invested in him to give us an executive order. And we've experienced many of them where they said, hey, I need your school reopening plan on my desk by midnight, and we received the thing, by midnight on Saturday, and we received the thing, at nighttime on Friday. So it's interesting to me that, what we've received from the governor hasn't been an executive order, hasn't been a direction. It's been, comments in a press conference, and then a letter from Zucker. And you've got to believe that Dr. Zucker doesn't write a letter to the CDC saying the things that he says unless the governor agreed with him, right? I mean, I got to believe that. Again, nobody has thought to call me and consult with me about that, but that's something that I think is a reasonable supposition. So nonetheless, we didn't get that gubernatorial executive order that says, you know what? I'm telling you, no masks unless and until the CDC says otherwise. In which case we'd say, all right, that's got the force of law and authority that we've relied on in all these other moments, whether we liked it or not, because we raised our hands, we took an oath, we abide by the law as it's been laid out. Interestingly, as this evolved, what we got was governor in a press conference talking about it, letter from Zucker from the CDC. This is the order of events, right? Then Saturday morning, Dan Fuller, who is the governor's representative, saying, hey, wait a minute, don't you guys get out there in front of this and think that this is the blessing to remove masks Monday morning. This is just a letter from Zucker to the CDC seeking to implement something, and the guidance will follow. And then we get, after much discussion back and forth, and obviously terrible confusion because of the, we all know how passionate our community, and we are personally, is about this issue. We get something that comes from a complete other person, not an executive order, not a clarification from the state health department, not even a clarification from the local health department, but something from the Commissioner of Education, who is nonetheless empowered to give us direction, saying, hey, the guidance hasn't changed and you're to abide by it and wait and see. The only thing I can hope for, if we're talking about, next steps, is to say, maybe we wait 24 hours, see what happens on Monday, and hope that, because this whole thing, let's think about the confluence of events, right? It's, late afternoon on Friday, Zucker sends his letter to the CDC, as Jim and I and others have, Jim Kiernan and others have talked about. Not surprising that the CDC might say, I don't work for you. I don't have to jump to you just because, you say jump. I don't say how high. I say I'll get back to you on Monday. Maybe, just maybe, we get that clarification and blessing on Monday that puts us in a great position to go forward on Tuesday. Or in the alternative, I mean, that would be my advice. Just wait and see what happens Monday to give us some information about what to do Tuesday. And if that means we all have to stand by, potentially have a special meeting to evaluate what comes forth, that might be the sensible way to proceed.
You didn't actually answer my question. If the governor and the Commissioner of Education were on different pages and gave us different directives, forget this whole thing exists. Governor said A, Commissioner of Education said B. Who do we listen to legally?
It depends on how they said it, right? It depends on whether they said, whether the governor issued an executive order, whether, normally we would be dealing with, on a regular basis, the guidance from the state ed department pursuant to the authority of the Commissioner of Education. That would be the normal course of events for us, because we're an educational entity, and the Commissioner of Education is the government officer who tends to, write the decisions and write the guidance and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, in this pandemic, the governor has been involved in an almost daily basis in our lives in terms of how we run our affairs and so forth. The governor hasn't issued an executive order. I would say to you, in answer to your question, if the governor issued this directive by an executive order, then I would say we are perfectly within our authority to listen to that executive order, irrespective of what anybody else says. If the Commissioner of Education had not weighed in with an explicit directive to say the old guidance still applies, I would have been very comfortable saying to you, it appears that Zucker's letter is becoming effective Monday. That's what he stated. He's the senior health official. It's a pandemic. He's invested with this authority. Let's follow that directive and wait and see. And if somebody tells us otherwise, we'll see how it breaks down. It's difficult, though, for me to sit here as your lawyer to say that we shall willfully disregard something that the commissioner has written as late as, 2:30 this afternoon. That's a pretty tough thing.
So I'm going to put a motion on the floor, because I feel like this is all just fluff. Okay. And I feel, and I know we're all frustrated, but there is no clear, concise answer. There is no, this is what you do and that's what you do. If I run into 7-Eleven tomorrow and I rob 7-Eleven, there's a clear and concise answer as to what is going to happen to me. I'm going to be arrested. There's no clear and concise answer here. So I'm going to put a motion on the floor that we lift our mask mandates now. Anybody who wants to wear one, please, by all means.
Second the motion.
Thank you.
Second the motion.
All right, we're going to keep going. Sarah, I promise I'll call it afterward, but other people had their hands up.
Chris, can you just let us know the repercussions if we don't listen to the commissioner, and what could be the repercussions for the school board and the superintendent?
So the most recent example of that was obviously in Comac, where there was an intention stated to deviate from what ultimately turned out to be the guidance. And there was a suggestion that that was a significant problem and that there were going to be monitors and all that kind of stuff. At some point, as I discussed with you last Wednesday, if there is a determination by, entities authorized to make that determination, wouldn't be the governor himself, but that a board member or a certified staff member has engaged in a willful violation of law, then, obviously they could seek to either remove the board member or remove an individual's certification. I'm not trying to create boogeymen here and say that that's likely to happen, but you've asked me a direct question and I'm giving you a direct answer in terms of worst case scenarios. And, the potential liability for violating the order. I mean, you have whatever
You don't even
rights
have an
somebody
order
would have.
there.
Well, that's the problem, right, Meredith? Exactly right. I mean, we don't have an
You
order.
show
That's,
me the law that I'm breaking and I won't break it.
we have examples of
give other people one
governmental cowardice in suggesting that there's a change when there hasn't been an order to specifically make the change. There's been issued a letter that appeared to have the effect of an order on Friday, upon which us and many other school districts were prepared to react over the weekend. Think about how unfair that is, dropping a bomb on you on Friday of that magnitude. But everybody got together, worked their butt off over the weekend to try and put a plan in place for Monday morning to deal with this total sea change in what we've been dealing with. And then we get, well, that wasn't an order. It isn't an order. The governor doesn't issue an executive order. He's got the authority to do that and hasn't. We get Dan Fuller saying, nah, that's not what Zucker meant. And then we get the commissioner saying, stay the course with the old guidance. So I agree with you. I don't know. It's hard to tell whether we're coming and going. We're getting whipsawed back and forth between different people. And all I can say to you is that, you ask me a direct question, I'll give a direct answer, but I got to put it in context. And
And we're all being scared for the Comac thing, but the Comac thing, there were 3 school districts that stood up before Comac. So why did he only go after Comac? I didn't see anything in writing about Comac except what Comac said.
Meredith, there's a long line. I promise everyone's going to talk. This is just so for the community. I know that this conversation is frustrating, but this is what transparency looks like. I did not want to just ask Chris to send a letter out, not talk, not see us. Let the conversation at least happen, and maybe somebody either changes their mind or maybe the school is not going to follow something. I don't know where this is going to go, but I want at least the conversation to be as transparent and open and honest as possible. It's Rob, Laura, and then Jimmy.
Chris Clayton.
Skip me.
Sorry, Bill after Rob, then Laura.
Chris, in the Comac situation, who threatened to send monitors down? Who threatened to to provide the oversight?
I was not on the receiving end of those correspondences. I'm relying on what was reported in the media that it was state health officials.
So the state health officials were the ones that did.
Yeah.
So my experience with dealing with public health, and I've dealt with public health for 35 years of my career. The CDC always makes recommendations, and those recommendations go out to all of the states for consideration. The New York State Department of Health, will either accept those recommendations, or will not accept them. But then if they do accept those recommendations, they pass them down to all of the county health departments, and all of the county health departments are all on different pages. They don't all have the same codes and guidelines, to things, issues dealing with public health. So where I thought this was going to be solid yesterday, that the Commissioner of Education, with the endorsement of Governor Cuomo, was going to pass this down. The last group or entity that I thought was going to throw a hand grenade in there was the State Department of Education.
I concur.
Yeah. So at what point? I mean, what exactly are we waiting for? Are we waiting? The CDC is going to say, look, we just make recommendations. You guys could either accept them or decline them. Do they have the ultimate power on what happens in the states?
Well, I think at least from what I interpreted I guess to the extent that they promulgated a rule that said thou shalt comply, as opposed to we're giving guidance and recommendation, I suppose federal funding could be tied to that in some way, Rob. I haven't gotten that granular in terms of what their enforcement might look like, in that regard, because we've all been kind of working through the guidance that we've received from the state health departments interpreting that. I read Zucker's letter to say basically, look, we're no longer satisfied that this need exists. You're going to give us direction to the contrary if you see fit. But if you don't, we're going to proceed with a plan. And they outline, at least in bullet point form, it wasn't, the same kind of like 24-page guidance that we're typically accustomed to seeing from them. But we're going to modify our guidance as I'm describing right now. And among the most critical parts of that modification were that we're no longer going to require masks, whether people are immunized or not. And again, to my eye, and my concern was always on behalf of the students, are they also going to relax the quarantine protocols? Because if our kids come back without masks and they apply the old quarantine protocols, we could have a situation where our kids, a close contact could knock out 50, 100 people and teachers. So
whether we have masks on or not masks on, any close contact can knock out 50 kids.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, so I was hoping, though, that with that guidance, it was going to go the other way. Not that we're going to get more restrictive. It's going to say we're relieving mask guidelines, and we're saying that, by way of example, a close contact could go and get a negative PCR test and come back to school. If they're asymptomatic and they get a negative test, they're not going to get quarantined. And now we know that the tests can get turned around a lot more quickly. You kept hoping and thinking and praying that the guidance was going to get, a little bit more in touch with the times on all fronts, not take a step backwards after the Friday letter and do something else. So, guys, I just want to assure you, this is not something that I am, I'm the last person who wants to see this go the way that it has gone. It was with great enthusiasm that I hope to be able to opine to you that, the apparent authority of the state health departments has been put behind the idea that we can return Monday without masks. But I'd be remiss if I didn't point out what the Commissioner of Education came out with this afternoon on Sunday. It's unfair. It's inappropriate. I don't know how to deal with it. If you choose to say, we'll wait a little bit and hear it, that's one option. If you do the other, I can't fail to at least identify what the potential risks would be, as Sarah has asked me to do. That's all.
Chris, if the governor had come out with an executive order and said, this is my executive order, does the Commissioner of Education trump him in this situation?
If the governor issues an executive order, I think not.
No.
I think that the governor's executive order would bind.
Happens, the governor should have taken ownership.
Why not? Exactly, Rob. That's the easiest thing in the world. The governor takes ownership of it and says, unless and until the CDC, he easily could have qualified it too. Unless and until the CDC says otherwise and directs me otherwise, which is query as to whether they would or wouldn't, I'm directing that my public health officials have the authority to promulgate regulations that'll allow you to come in maskless. That would have been the easiest thing in the world. If that came out Friday, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
So from day one, since it started back in March of last year, the biggest issue that we've had is none of our municipalities and federal government, the CDC, the Department of Health, the State Department of Health, none of them are on the same page, and nor do they communicate with each other. And it's a problem because one creates a rule and another creates another rule. And the second part of this problem is that it's a constant battle of taking away our local control. Okay, the community elects us, okay, to represent the kids in the community in the school district. And the governor has been famous about he wants to take control away from local boards of education. He does not want boards of education, and he's did it with the tax cap and everything else. There's a whole slew of things we can get into. But the thing is that our local control is now being taken away by the Department of Health, the New York State Department of Health, the CDC, the county executives' offices, the Suffolk County Department of Health. We can't catch a break. We think we have, a directive, and all of a sudden somebody pulls a red flag, and now we don't have a directive. And this is a problem. He needs to come out, and he needs to be more specific about this executive order. If he's on the same page with the commissioner, the CDC is going to go, not our problem. If you think that we're going to change our guidelines for one state, they're not going to. So where does that put us tomorrow? Tomorrow, and I don't disagree. If we were to wait one day, okay, where does that put us if the CDC does not change their guidelines for New York State? Okay, where does that put us?
Well, if the Commissioner of Health is true to his word, he seems to have said, and again, I'm loath now to try and interpret what everybody means, because every time you read plain English in a guidance document, somebody tells you that the plain English that you read, that you've been taught to read, by the good educators that I deal with on a daily basis since I was in kindergarten, isn't what it says. But ideally, what you'd have is the state commissioner says, well, I haven't received guidance to the contrary or direction to the contrary, and so I will implement my local guidance irrespective of what the old guidance said, because I've given the CDC a fair opportunity to weigh in and tell me I may not. They haven't. Now, again, question as to whether writing something Friday afternoon before a weekend and tell me by Monday is a fair opportunity for the CDC to weigh in and give guidance. It goes back to what Jim Kiernan said earlier. I could imagine somebody in the CDC saying, I don't work for you. I don't have to do, your deadline. But it appeared at least that the state health officials were poised to say almost, and as Dr. Pelletieri, introduced the whole concept with when he made his opening remarks, we would have believed that if you're going to write a letter that's that definitive on Friday afternoon, that you do so with kind of the knowledge and understanding that you already have the answer and you just haven't received it in writing yet. And now to have this sort of complete left turn at the last minute is utterly mind-boggling. What's
frustrating is that the entity, New York State Department of Health, who usually just gets guidelines or recommendations from the CDC, now asking the CDC for their blessing and their approval. It seems backwards to me.
And you would think that they have the inherent authority. Again, I would argue to you, and again, this is kind of amplifying on the discussion that Meredith initiated. If the governor initiated an explicit order that said this is the case by executive order, I agree with everybody that we wouldn't be having this conversation, because the governor would have that authority. He didn't do it. The state health commissioner, who speaks for him, presumably, I'm imagining that the commissioner of health wouldn't have gotten out in front of such an issue without the governor's knowledge and blessing. So you got to believe that the two of them are simpatico on the issue. Wrote that, and as Dr. Pelletieri said, we were under that assumption that they wouldn't have done that unless they knew the answer, and we were going to be sailing into Monday with a clear path to do what we were expecting to do. And then we hopefully getting more explicit guidance on all those other ancillary issues that I was talking to you about, quarantine rules and things like that, and yet here we are now with a complete other piece of information. It's just, I am your lawyer, and it's difficult for me to say to you, the Commissioner of Education has issued this directive in bold to you, ignore it.
So now I hear
and yet I share your frustration every bit of the way, as we've discussed.
Does she have the legal right to put a stop in this until further notice?
She has the authority as a constitutional officer to give directions to school districts about educational matters. Yeah, I mean, I believe that she does. This is it's hard for me to parse it out and say that she's exceeding her authority. And I think that for us to make a unilateral determination that she's done so, ergo we're going to ignore it, is a hard place to be.
I understand.
And you guys have the authority that you have. You're the elected officials. I don't say this with joy. They've put us in a terrible, terrible, terrible position. And the sort of alphabet soup of regulatory and administrative agencies that are, have got us caught in the crossfire, us and our community. Let's not just us, right? We're all adults. We signed up for this. We took the job, right? But the kids and the parents and the staff and everybody else who's caught in it, it's just an unenviable, awful position to be in. I wish it were otherwise, but I have to report back to you with fidelity what the state of affairs is, so that when you're making your decisions, you're doing so with the best information that I can give you.
And your recommendation is to wait the one day and see.
Look, and again, that's as much a political recommendation as a legal representation, Rob. It's just one of those, like, maybe we give it, because the reality is we haven't had any business hours, right? That edict, that letter from from Dr. Zucker comes out Friday afternoon, arguably everybody at the CDC went home for the weekend at that point. We haven't had like a business day where that request has been processed, dealt with, whether, you know, maybe based on the CDC's decision to act or not act, the State Department of Health decides to act. And you know, the problem is that if we hadn't received this afternoon the commissioner's statement and direction, it would have been a much easier path to say the best information we have came from, you know, the state health commissioner who has the apparent authority to issue that directive. Let's just run with that on Monday. And if it changes Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, we'll deal with the change when it comes. That kind of left field directive from state ed now puts me in the position of having to say, if I, under the best circumstances and trying to protect the best interests of the district, I'd love to see us wait to see what happens Monday. But I realize too that creates chaos for us. And you know, we have a lot of parents and a lot of people who are passionate about this issue, as I know everybody on this board is. You know, without revealing our executive session discussions, I know how passionate the board is about getting kids back to school safely, but with eased restrictions that are reflective of the evolving science, which I think we all think is something that would support the opportunity to get back without masks in a safe way. But it's a real monkey wrench in the gear works that we've just had thrown at 2:30 this afternoon. And I don't know,
Chris,
I don't know how to tell you to ignore that.
Unacceptable what the state is doing today.
It's unacceptable what the state is doing. I agree with you philosophically completely there.
Bill?
I'm up.
Yes, sir, please.
All right. First of all, I just need to state I'm in somebody's backyard. I'm at a barbecue and my phone's about to go dead. So I've got limited time that I continue to be online and I'd like to get to the vote. But look, folks, we've been going round and round about this. All right. I've been interacting with government at every level from the federal down to the local for a long time now in partisan politics. Make no mistake about it. None of this is a mistake. Zucker is one of the closest allies of the governor, right? They're on the same page. You've got a squabble over at the state education department if, in fact, that is an authentic letter from the commissioner out of the state education department. They look to obfuscate. They want to distance themselves from any blame whatsoever should something go wrong. That's what this is about. The choice is ours. We need to move and make our decision. I stand behind Meredith's motion, which was the same motion I put forth Wednesday night. The only difference now is the governor and the commissioner of health have said, we're fine with this. It really shouldn't be a heavy lift for us at all to tonight make good on this. And should we find ourselves in some peril whatsoever, as was pointed out many times before, between all of the contradictory information that has flowed, we are on pretty solid ground, and our attorney, Chris Clayton, and his law firm, Ingerman and Smith, can represent us, and they will have more than a legal leg to stand on that we've done the right thing. So I would just please ask that we can move along and get to the vote on this, because I'm sure that will shake out whatever this is going to be in the end.
We have Laura and then Jimmy. I don't
Just
know if
really quick, Chris Clayton, you know, I work for attorneys. I say we make mass optional tomorrow because this has been too confusing, and then let them come and tell us, no, we didn't mean that. Let them come, let us say mass optional starting tomorrow. New York State, you come here and say, no, you can't do that, because we would get a warning. They're not doing anything to us because they just contradicted themselves 10 times in a weekend. That's it.
Mr. Mancaruso.
No, I agree. I don't want to drag this on. I agree with Bill. Jim Kiernan said it well earlier. This is much different than when the issue we were dealing with on Wednesday. This is politics. To me, there's no risk. This is there's no willful violation of law. This is ambiguity. This is politics. You know, I'm not letting the kids wait any longer. I'm willing to, I think we should vote now.
All right. I know I just saw Rob's hand. Did I miss anybody in between? And then we will vote after Rob, please.
Chris, did most of the schools that you represent pull back today?
Yeah, I haven't polled obviously I have 65 some odd school districts. I've tried to gather as much information as possible. I know there were a few that were out. saying that they were going to, go without masks based on the guidance that had been there. And then ultimately, when the commissioner issued the decision that they did, they pulled back on that. So I'm not aware of, again, please don't hold me to this because there's a possibility that I haven't spoken to someone somewhere, but I'm not aware of another that's out there doing it.
You're not aware of any other schools that are doing it?
Not as I sit here right now. And, please don't hold it against me if you find out that some other district that my firm represents has made a decision along those lines. If they did so, it's because if I'm saying that because I don't know, but I'm not aware of anyone. All have said that basically going to wait and see what happens Monday and then take it from there.
Yeah, which, in your legal opinion, is to wait the 24-hour period and see.
If we could tolerate that, I'd love to do it
Yeah.
just because, again, my concern is that we haven't, to the extent that we wanted to see the change happen, we haven't even, the state hasn't. Now, I keep saying we, it's not our fault. We didn't do any of this. We had nothing to do with any of this other than having the will and the desire to get our kids back without that issue. But, the stuff that's been happening started happening Friday afternoon and hasn't had a chance to mature into, a sensible discussion by all of the people who are going to be at work on Monday. I'd love to see exactly what the guidance is going to look like and from whom, and hopefully, with the benefit of a business day under our belts, we see, look, as we've seen in the last 36 to 48 hours, massive changes back, forth, and around the issue. I'd love to see if we get greater clarity on Monday. I respect it. I respect and will defend to the death the board's decision legally, but
The letter from the commissioner was clear and concise as to what we had to do.
the letter from the Commissioner of Health appeared in.
No, the commissioner, the
Commissioner of Education was unequivocal and bold. Yes.
Wasn't even clear and concise that it was from her, though. It's from her.
I have no reason to
All
believe
right,
it wasn't.
let's just do the vote because.
Yeah, let's vote.
Yeah, we're going round and round. Cast the vote.
Okay.
My phone goes dead.
We're gonna roll call it. We have a motion and a second to make masks optional and follow the Friday guidance. And if there is new guidance that comes out tomorrow or the next day, then we will reconvene, or we could send just a letter, up to anybody. Motion by Meredith, second by Bill. We're gonna roll call it. Meredith,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Sarah. I'm just gonna call it in the way that I see it on my screen. No, Matthew. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I didn't see what that said.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes. Rob,
I would wait the 24 hours as per our advice for legal counsel. So I would say no.
Jim.
Which one?
I'm sorry, Jim Kiernan. Did you say yes? I just want to verbally hear you, just so everyone can hear you. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Jimmy Mancaruso.
I'm a yes.
Laura.
Yes.
And for the reasons that everyone stated earlier and today, I think this is a totally different situation than we were Wednesday. There was clear guidance given on Friday, and if they want to slap our hand now, then that's on them. So masks are optional. Chris, that's the directive from the board. If you can release a letter to the community saying just that. And if you guys hear anything between now and tomorrow or the next day, just let us know and we'll hop back on. I just want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. And I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Our community. Motion and second to adjourn. Motion by Rob, second by Jimmy. All in favor?
Aye.
Good
Aye.
night, everyone. Thank you so much for hopping
Good night.
on.